So my reaction to Sirui bringing out and announcing a anamorphic adapter for both anamorphic lenses and spherical lenses, I was ecstatic. However, that soon changed. So this one's going to be a tricky one. Future me interrupting, stay with the journey, but I just wanted to let you know that there is a bit of a plot twist coming later. So stick with it and I'll see you at the end. But before I get ahead of myself, let me back up. So Sirui are an amazing company in my opinion. They've brought out some fantastic anamorphic lenses. It was probably maybe 3 years ago when I first got on board their anamorphic lenses. I purchased a APS-C lens, which is currently sitting on my GH5 right now. Fast forwarding to today, at point of this video, has released a new series, which are full frame, but also an adapter, which is what I am talking about today. What makes this preliminary review so difficult is the fact that I both have gone from loving some of the qualities this gives you, but also feeling rather conflicted about whether or not in fact I want to return it completely or get a replacement. I'm currently in discussions with Sirui about this because I've received my production model and it is, let's say, I've had a few issues with it. Well, backing up, as soon as I got this lens, I unboxed it, I got my R6 and threw the 24-70 on it. If you don't already know, one of the advantages of this lens is being able to put it on any spherical lens. So I think that I'm still interested in their full frame lenses, but at the moment I thought, let me see how this new generation of lenses will operate. It's an 82mm thread, so it is pretty large and hefty. They do supply various filter threads, I think like 67, 72 and maybe 77, but I've used them all the way down to I think a 49 on a nifty 50, which I'll be showing some samples shortly. I'm thinking that a 1.25 stretch will give a pretty decent, you know, bokeh and a result with it. So yeah, I was very much looking forward to it. And obviously, what's the first test that anyone does with anamorphic? So clearly I'm on the GH5 right now. So, you know, well, in fact, you've already got that there to show you that there is a blue flare going on. I have been finding it extremely tricky focusing and getting any kind of sharpness on this adapter. So immediately when I did my little light test with it, the first shocking thing that I thought was, where's the flares? From the videos that they had presented and documentation, it was kind of suggested that it would enhance any characteristics of the lens, for one, but also, you know, they had images of flares on spherical lenses. You know, maybe the marketing on it wasn't particularly clear to say that you wouldn't get anamorphic flares with this, but from what I had seen on some of the product shots and some of the test screens, you know, maybe they were filming with the anamorphic lenses, but specifically when it was talking about being able to put it on any lenses, and even when I watched, I think it was Cine D had an episode where one of their presenters were seemingly very excited about it and, you know, did his little light test and everything with it. Obviously, thereafter, I put it on the GH5 with the APS-C lens, 35mm, and, you know, clearly I was getting a lot of flares. However, on the 24-70, the first thing I noticed was it's green. I was getting a lot of green from the lens, and fair enough, some of it was the source that I was using, just the iPhone light on the back. But even that, the flares from the lens itself were adding a lot of green fringing because the reflection in the glass was very green. When I bought my first lens from Sirui, I was very shocked because there was an error with their lens. I think it was a manufacturing error because the reflections were green. When you looked at the lens, it was green, and when you got flares, it was extremely green. Not again, how could this be happening for a second time with the same company? Thinking, okay, I'll have to send it back because I don't want to keep this green reflection, you know, tint. And they were asking for samples, and obviously with a anamorphic lens, you don't see it as much because you've got a really strong blue. The green makes it slightly more teal perhaps, whereas when you put it on a spherical lens, I did seem to notice it a lot more. Yeah, I think there is a problem, and that green tinge is showing up, and I don't think that's a very nice look being green. But my second problem that I found, and this was the big one which I did not expect. I tested the 85mm, the 24-70, the 50mm, the 50mm Nifty 50 1.8, the 100-300mm, and the 70-200, all in the EFs. I did a whole load of these, and all of them I thought were barely usable and barely, you know, in focus. And in fact, the 100-300 and the 70-200 was almost completely unusable. It was so bad. So on the GH5 here we have the Sirui 35mm with and without the adapter. When you punch in, you can see quite a loss of sharpness on the right when the adapter's on. What do you think? I then fed these back to Sirui. They basically gave me a list of requirements of how to get the best use out of the lens. Now, the first thing that was really, again, disheartening was the fact that you cannot use, if you have a 1.2 lens like the, you know, the 50mm that I'm using, I'm thinking, put an adapter on, you know, 1.2 times squeeze factor, boom, you're in bokeh heaven. But in actual fact, you would have to stop down to like 3.5 to 4, because to get anything that's usable in terms of focus, because seemingly the depth of field is so narrow you can barely find focus. And on all the tests I did on, you know, little toy models, they were extremely soft. But the first round was all out, you know, 1.8 or 1.2 or 1.4. If I buy a 1.2, I want to use a 1.2. Think, well, okay, it's a squeeze, but is it, can I really use it in a practical sense? So in all the tests that I've done, I've had to have gone to like a 4 or a 5.6 on a lot of the lenses, even the 100-300, which goes to a 5.6. I need to stop that down to 7 or 9 on the aperture before it's, you know, I get more than a slither that's in focus. Is this a deal breaker? I'm still not sure. You know, if you're going to pay roughly 400, you still want, and that's what I know about Sirui, is that you get sharp lenses. So it's like you need to have super sharp lenses to make use out of this. Maybe it would actually be better to get focus on both lenses. Okay, it might be easier, but the quality of the sharpness is a little soft. And I know anamorphics are known for having slightly softer lenses, but ultimately I kind of feel like I think it could be better. And how are you going to get bokeh in the background? Even this at a high depth, and if I'm shooting at 2.83 on this lens, it's not going to give you a lot of bokeh, that is. Now, when I was shooting with the diopters and shooting more close up, definitely on some of the tests you could get some nice bokeh, but even at that you're still having to stop down. Now, one of the issues you may run into on a multi-cam setup or even 2-camera setups is if the camera with the adapter has to stop down, you may find that you're obviously losing light, but then the other cameras, if they don't need to stop down to adjust for the adapter, your scene's going to be unbalanced. You could use ISO to help with this, but again, it's just one more thing to consider. So, decisions. Do I keep this lens? Do I send it back? I still think I will be sending this lens back to change because of the flaring issue. Sirui, after I sent the samples, have said it looks a little green. So they have acknowledged that even the image on this has a reflection of the lens being blue, not green. So yeah, I am a little bit, as you can tell, a little bit And on the sharpness front, Sirui has said to literally just stop down to get that sharpness back. I did expect some loss of sharpness, but not to the level that I've seen it. I recently came across this YouTube channel and their samples seem to be somewhat sharper, even to the point of shooting down to 1.4. Maybe it is just the version that I have. Sirui? And I do think I will use it if I keep it, but it does make me a little less excited about, you know, picking it up. When I got the Anamorphic, it was like you could just pick it up and run and gun. The ergonomics of this lens is a little tricky because when you've got, you know, your camera, lens, whatever in hand, the front end of the lens is quite, you know, top heavy, or front heavy should I say. And the focus throw is longer than what I'm used to with the APS-C. So trying to find focus is a little harder. So one thing I forgot to mention is that when you have the adapter on, it's pretty front heavy. Say cheaper, maybe plastic fantastic lenses, you will probably need to have some support, but even at that it can be quite fragile. In one sense, if you've got someone pulling focus for you, that's great, but if you're, it's definitely not in the run and gun field. Whereas the APS-C or some of their other lenses, I think you could, you know, be operating and pulling focus. This lens, I think you're going to be on sticks a lot more than trying to roam around and run and gun with. I think you could probably get away with some handheld, but nothing where you're massively pulling focus if you're self-shooting. Yeah, bear that in mind. I do think it's a step forward. I do think it's something that's a good tool, but I feel like it's a first generation rather than, you know, a fully fledged realized product. Maybe that's a bit harsh, and this is an interim review. So I've had to throw out the conclusions that I've recorded so far, so I'm starting again from scratch because I was given a Sigma R50mm 1.2 and it basically changed the way that I have experienced this adapter. It was, I would say, usable from 1.8 up. It was a lot sharper, it was easier to use, and basically all the tests that went before, which I had a very mixed bag of feelings and results with, this 50mm Art 2.1 definitely performed a lot better. Now, I was then able to test a few more lenses. I used the Sangyam cinema lens and a Meike cinema lens. I think the Meike was a 2.0 and the Sangyam was a 1.5, and both of these performed really well. I should have some clips to share. I shot something focusing manually using diopters, and I felt like it was more usable, and it was actually quite a fun experience to use the adapter with it, and I was quite happy with the results. It was sharp, and yeah, it just kind of felt like finally I was getting what I was expecting with this lens. Now, it seems to be that with this lens there's a bit of an X factor. Now, your experience and or usage of it will totally depend on the array of lenses that you have and how they are built. Price doesn't really play into this because, you know, testing on almost a £2 lens versus, you know, maybe a 300 to 500 pound lens, the 300 pound lens version was better in usage and sharpness, even though, for example, when I tested the 50mm 1.2, it is known to be a little bit soft. But even, for example, another expensive lens like the 85 the 85 GM Master lens, which is I think it's a 1.4, you know, again, another quite expensive lens. It is very sharp, but it was almost unusable when I used that on a Sony, and normally you get fantastic images with. So again, it seems to be there's some kind of secret sauce with the Sirui, if you forgive the bad analogy, of how it works with certain lenses. I don't know what it is, whether the fact that the 50mm is a macro and therefore maybe it has the way it's built or the elements that it has inside it allow it to perform better. The cinema lenses worked really well. Maybe it's just because of the sharpness or the way the build quality is more for video and rather than photography. So again, I'm not entirely sure why or what is causing the issue, but I do know that certain lens works great, and unfortunately some of the vintage lenses that I have that have a lot of characteristics to it don't work particularly well. Although I do have some sharper lenses and they did work well, but then some of the lenses that were sharp and expensive, they too then didn't work. All that I know is that when you do get a lens that performs well with it, it's quite beautiful and it does make you want to shoot, and it does give you, dare I use the word again, cinematic feel and flavor to it, even on a spherical lens. So my conclusion is that I really enjoy this adapter. I had to go through a bit of growing pains with it and understanding how to use it, even though I don't fully know why it works on some and not others, and that cost isn't really a factor in that. I would say that this lens is geared toward maybe more experienced cinematographers, filmmakers, videographers who are willing to take a bit more time in either shooting and maybe, because it will slow you down a touch. I think you still can run and gun with this net lens, going back on what I said previously, but it will need some testing and you'll need to put some time into figuring out what it is. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. It's definitely been a journey, and obviously I will probably continue this in a part 2. I would like to shoot some projects with it and then feedback to test more lenses and to see how it works in a real world scenario, so stay tuned for that. And finally, please do like, send up the algorithm. I'm sure people who may be interested in viewing or buying this lens or renting it in future would like to know how it performs with some lenses and or the experience that users are having. Finally, if there's any comments that you have, please put it below. I'll try and get back to you in person and or put it in a follow-up video. So thanks again for watching, and see you all in the next one. Bye now.